I have a very soft spot in my heart for early internet creepypasta and writing projects. There was something charming at the time about people throwing out these obtuse short horror stories to try to scare the living bejesus out of someone on your crappy broadband connection. Stories like Slenderman, SCP Foundation, The Rake all started on the early days of the internet, but today I want to take a short look into one of my favorite stories to come out of that time period. The Holder of the End and the Holder series. The Holder started where most did from this time period, an anime-based image board that will remain not to be named because, well, YouTube doesn't like it. The first posting of this story has been lost to time, but where I can place it is about 2009 to 2010 as to when it first started showing up in some archives. It started as just a regular post in the writing your own creepypasta threads that most of these stories were born from. This particular thread breaking off after this post to talk about its implications and to write other stories of what the other held objects in this series are. I'll be getting to what that means in a moment. Yeah. This grew into its own short-lived writing project that had its own website and wiki until its death in about 2015, where Slenderman was about an extra-dimensional stalker that ate people, and SCP was about the containment of dangerous creatures and objects. The Holder takes a bit more of a broad approach in its subject matter and its short-lived writing project. I wanted to talk about this because I can't find any other recent discourse on the series, and it'd really bum me out if these stories were eventually lost to time, as some of the series already has. What I wanted to do in this video was narrate the story in full and give my thoughts on it, and talk about the few other standout stories in the series and what I think all of this means. While there are other stories in the series, I want to focus on this one for now, and if someone likes this video, I can do more on additional stories in this project. I think I've introduced it well enough, so let's get into it. My name is Red Canaday. This is a short look into the Holder series, and I'd like to thank you for watching. The story is fairly short, so I'm going to read it in full before I get into my thoughts about it. In any city, in any country, go to any mental institution or halfway house you can get yourself into. When you reach the front desk, ask to visit someone who calls himself the Holder of the End. First of all, never do this in real life. This is a dumb internet creepypasta. Don't bother underpaid healthcare workers. Should a look of childlike fear come over the worker's face, you will then be taken to a cell in the building. It will be in a deep hidden section of the building. Knowing what some mental health institutions or halfway houses look like, most are not all that large. Putting that aside, let's keep going. All you will hear is the sound of someone talking to themselves echo the halls. It is in a language that you will not understand, but your very soul will feel unspeakable fear. Should the talking stop at any time, stop and quickly say aloud, "I'm just passing through. I wish to talk." If you still hear silence, flee. Leave. Do not stop for anything. Do not go home. Don't stay at an inn. Just keep moving and sleep where your body drops. You will know in the morning if you've escaped. My advice, if you've ever stumbled upon some sort of seemingly supernatural situation in real life, just immediately nope out of there and either go home or somewhere that supernatural things don't happen. No one complains about a haunting at a DMV. Just saying. Get yourself an ice cold juice of some Seinfeld at home. Don't be doing all this. If the voice in the hall comes back after you utter those words, continue on. Upon reaching the cell, all you will see is a windowless room with a person in the corner, speaking an unknown language and cradling something. The person will only respond to one question. What happens when they all come together? The person will then stare into your eyes and answer your questions in horrifying detail. Many go mad in that very cell. Some disappear soon after the meeting, and a few end their lives. But most do the worst thing and look upon the object in the person's hands. You will want to as well. Be warned that if you do, your death will be one of cruelty and unrelenting horror. Your death will be in that room, by that person's hands. That object is one of 538. They must never come together. Never. God, I actually got chills from that, reading that again. So to recap, this is a story that reads as a set of instructions that takes you to a mental hospital to ask the receptionist about the Holder of the End. I'll go into what I think this object or group of objects are in a moment. The author tells you that they lead you farther into the hospital or halfway house. By the way, if you happen to not know what halfway house is, it's a place for recently freed prisoners to live and reintegrate into society with the help of a social worker and to complete their parole requirements. What that has to do with supernatural entities holding magical objects, I don't know personally. I'm still sitting at home with an ice cold juice. They lead you further in and you begin hearing voices from further inside and are instructed to say, "I'm just passing through. I wish to talk." It's very interesting that you're given incredibly specific instructions along with contingencies with what to do based on certain situations. But I'll leave that for the next section where I give you my thoughts on what this all means. If the voices continue, you're instructed to keep going, but if they stop, you have to run for your life as fast as you can, as long as you can, and to not stop until your body gives out. This is never elaborated upon, and I think it's incredibly unnerving to have this be entirely mysterious as to what you're escaping from and why. Then you meet a person that is never described as to what they look like, sitting in a cell cradling something that's description is never clarified, and only enlightened by the author at the end of the story as the end, and the holder of the end. You're instructed to ask, what happens when they all come together? And you're told horrifying details of what may happen if you were to gather all of these artifacts that are said to make many go mad for the ones that have tried before you. Also that if you look upon the end, that your death will be in that cell, by that person. I just want to take a moment to point out so many things this short story does well. There's so much information that's just not fleshed out that really makes you wonder about so much of this story, and I think that's why it sticks with me for so long compared to other types of creepypasta stories. It's not just a straightforward story about a haunted video game cartridge with hyper-realistic bleeding eyes. Jesus Christ, please stop, horror writers. Instead of having a traditional first or third person narrative, it's told in a second person, or like a set of instructions that you might read on a website, like forgotten or forbidden information, that is presented as something that as you're reading it, you feel as though you're in over your head. As far as, what does this mean? Why would I want to do this? Who wants to do this, and for what reason? Why haven't Capcom announced Devil May Cry 6? Please, it's the only thing I'm still living for, god damn it. What I think that this story means, with the holder of the end, is instructions about some kind of world-ending collection of items that the author of the pasta, being a person in a cult, that wishes to see this brought about. And I'll tell you why I think that. The narrator has way too much information on the subject of this story to not have either tried to retrieve it themselves, or have instructed others to retrieve it themselves, possibly for him or others. And I think it adds another layer of sinisterness to the story. This also aligns with how the other stories in the series may also ask you to hand off the object to someone else after obtaining it, or after going to one of these, well, I'll call them reality anomalies. It's a great format for writing horror stories as an interconnected writing project, and it makes me wish this story had as much tender love and care as something like the SCP project has had. From this point on, you can only speculate from the other stories on the whys and hows of this organization and why they're doing this. But I think it's a great basis for a series of stories, and it's a real bummer that only a few of the stories from the original website still remain today. But hey, who knows? Maybe someone might see this and be inspired to write their own. I feel like there's so many of these places your Yeah. I feel like there's so many places your imagination can go with this. Mort, I need you to sit down, bud. I feel like there's so many places your imagination can go with this. Intrinsically, it feels like you've stumbled through the wrong bathroom stall at Denny's and you found yourself in the back rooms. It's this rally-warping kind of sci-fi horror mix that I absolutely love and love reading stories about. I also hope you love this video. And once again, thank you for watching. I'll see you again. Until then, stay gold.